Bernie hearts Biden, but will it even matter? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now, and this episode is brought to you by our friends over at the Patriot Post, who are providing a free Patriots Primer on American Liberty. If you just sign up for their also free email alerts, I'll provide a link in the description below. And then, of course, to the members at BillWhittle.com who make this all possible. Bill, as you may have heard today in an incredible rally, which two men attended, Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, announced that he would in fact endorse Joe Biden after a long and serious diatribe about the coronavirus. I've got some other stuff I want to talk about in a New York Times piece by Nate Cohn about polling between Biden and Trump. But just off the top here, what impact, if any, do you think the actual endorsement from Bernie Sanders to Joe Biden will make in the race?
Pretty near zip, Scott. The only thing I could think of at all was that it would, potentially be one more factor against a Cuomo run or something at a free-for-all convention.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Correct. Yes. If Bernie's throwing his support behind Biden, and they pull the hat trick out at the Democratic convention and decide to nominate Cuomo in the last minute, then Bernie's support has already been pledged to Biden. I don't think it really matters too much, to be perfectly honest with you. That's the best I could come up with.
So do you think this is possible? I hadn't even considered this, but it's possibly a shut the door in the face of Andrew Cuomo?
No, I don't think it's intentionally that. It's just about the only effect I could think of, to be perfectly honest with you. There is one contender for the Democratic nomination now, and for Bernie to endorse anyone else would have been mulish on his part, but then again, that's their symbol.
Well, if I recall correctly from the last time around, and you probably remember better than I do, in 2016, he was kind of late in coming to the Hillary Clinton bandwagon and sort of lukewarm at that. Is an earlier entry at this point, perhaps that's the theory, is this time, hey, let's see if we can get some of those people that we lost last time around.
Well, one of the reasons his endorsement came so late last time around was because he was running Hillary Clinton to the mat, and everything Bernie Sanders does is late. It's all late, all of it. It's all after the fact. It's all anticlimactic and so on. I don't know if the idea of those two guys standing together is going to fire up anybody in the Democratic base who's not already fired up. I mean, their combined age is older than the Republic, I'd be willing to bet. and all I see are just two really particularly unpleasant old white guys. And I kind of like our older, somewhat occasionally unpleasant old orange guy a lot better.
Well, I was going to say, let's throw another unpleasant old white guy into the mix here. Nate Cohn has a piece in the April 13th episode of the New York Times at NYTimes.com under the headline, "Why Biden's Polling Lead versus Trump Isn't as Solid as It Looks." And he goes on for, 1,000 words in this thing. But the upshot of it is a couple of things. Number one, like a lot of polls before an election, you've got to make a distinction between registered voters and likely voters. And if you look at likely voters, Trump does significantly better. And then he's about 1 or 2 points better with likely voters than if you just look at registered voters. And then in what Nate Cohn calls the tipping point states, Trump is up about 3 or 4 points. And so the typical poll that you hear about that shows Joe Biden in the lead is probably 4 to 5 points off because of those two factors. And Cohn goes on to point out that Trump's, I'll call them Trump's Obama voters, the people who went from Obama to Trump, are staying with Trump. And in fact, the lead that he has right now among non-college educated, white, kind of working class people actually looks a little better at this point in the race than it did versus Hillary Clinton. And so now I just unloaded the entire hay wagon on you at one time. So feel free to take any piece of that you'd like. But I know that you've both said, don't get cocky, kid, at times when things look good for Trump, and don't get too concerned when things look good for Biden. How do you feel about this?
Well, I mean, obviously, you look at 2016 and all the predictions of how big Hillary's margin was, it was just wasn't there. I think even more shocking really is the kind of lead that Jimmy Carter had going into the 1980 election against Ronald Reagan. I mean, he was up by double digits for just until a couple of weeks before the election, I think, and Reagan just shellacked him. I mean, it wasn't a close call like the Trump Clinton election. I mean, Reagan just shellacked him. And they were calling it for Carter up until, just a couple weeks out. And then the polls managed to close, as they always do as we approach the finish line. I don't really believe much in polls anymore, Scott. I think the 2016 election was a pretty good indication that they don't measure something important. They certainly don't measure enthusiasm. And that was a big deal in 2016. When Bernie Sanders nominates Joe Biden, whatever enthusiasm was in the Democratic Party gets pitched into Slow Joe's bucket, and from that point, it's just the long bus ride around the outside of the stadium. I don't know what to say. I don't get cocky, kid is exactly right, but I mean, I saw a couple weeks ago on Drudge, which has become just insane. That Biden was up by 30 points or something like this. Okay, I don't really pay much attention to him. Figures don't lie, but liars sure can't figure, and it's a pretty good adage when it comes to this kind of thing.
Well, it seems to me that you can take data like that, but you have to have some sort of analysis that makes sense. That and I don't know what Nate Cohn's track record is, but just the way he's looking at this makes some sense to say, okay. When you're looking at a poll, was it registered or likely voters? I remember at the local level when I was running a local county level Republican committee, there are these voters that are basically you get 1 to 4 stars basically, and the 4 Republicans were the ones that we could always count on. They were the people that in the last 4 elections had turned out 4 times. But the 3-4 Republicans skipped a race during the last 4 elections. The 2-4 only voted in the presidential years, and then the 1-4s you could hardly, just don't waste your time. There's an interesting line in this Nate Cohn piece in the New York Times. It says, it raises the possibility that Democrats could win the most votes and lose the White House for the 3rd time in 6 presidential elections.
That ought to boost the popularity of the Electoral College among the Hollywood crowd. Who doesn't understand it and is incapable of understanding it because they simply don't understand why anything should be set up to protect the people in the middle of the country. Those people aren't real people. They're not famous. We don't know their names or anything. The entire idea of the Electoral College representing the entire width and breadth of the country is lost on them. They don't get it and they don't want to. We got to remember too, Scott, that these polls are taking place in the middle of a pandemic where the news media is grinding metal in its attempt to make Trump responsible for everything. He acted too early, he acted too late. He should have done this, he should have done that. And what I think is going to happen is what I thought was going to happen at the beginning of this, and that is that the media has portrayed this very serious COVID-19 pandemic. They have overpainted it to such a degree that there's virtually no way for Trump to not come out of this looking good compared to the original estimates. And so I'm a lot more interested in seeing what these numbers look like after both conventions. Let's not forget that Joe Biden, this is heaven sent for Joe Biden, the COVID-19 self-isolation. Heaven sent. If Biden had to be out on the road, it's inconceivable. Everybody is aware of the fact that even in his own house with tightly scripted teleprompter answers, he just can't get through it. And it's been a tremendous boost to Biden to have a good excuse to not be out on the campaign trail.
So former Vice President Biden, if you haven't seen it yet, I encourage our viewers to watch the recording of his live stream today in which he invited in Senator Bernie Sanders. And Senator Sanders goes into a relatively long piece, extemporaneously about what a horrible job President Trump is doing and how terrible this virus is and on and on. And then he gets down to the end as if it was a, kind of ipso facto so because things are so horrible, therefore I endorse Joe Biden. And when he says that he's endorsing Joe Biden, former Vice President Biden looked genuinely surprised. So he had this moment where he kind of went, huh, like how did that happen? And I thought, wow, was that just acting on his part, or had he forgotten why he sat down in front of the camera?
I was just going to go with B, and we've made a number of shows about how it is so appalling and so evil that you really feel you can't really even make fun of it anymore, But yeah, that was my thought. He looked surprised when he said, "I support Joe Biden for president." It's probably news to him that he was running for president by the time.
I could just see him, like his reaction. I expected him to kind of turn from the camera for a second and go, "Hey, Jill, guess what? Senator Sanders is endorsing me." So
yeah, the classic headline.
There's an interesting note here. It says that in this column, again, Nate Cohn, New York Times, Mr. Trump seems to have made gains among voters 45 to 65, or perhaps even younger, canceling out his losses among older voters overall. And they're talking about how Biden is strong among older voters. And Cohn is careful to point out, because this whole pandemic thing's going on and the impact on the economy and the perception, at least among the news media, that the president is doing a bad job of it all, things could change. But overall, he says, the lines of division have kind of fallen where they always do. And nothing has really changed, despite this, cataclysmic effect on the economy and the health of the nation. The dividing lines are about where they were before.
Well, here's why Donald Trump is president and why I believe he's going to be reelected for a second term as president. Donald Trump is president because he's a self-promoter, and this is the thing that drives most of the liberals and a lot of conservatives just plain nuts, is because he's a braggart and he boasts about things. I don't think calling him a braggart is an inaccurate term for him. He's my president. I voted for him. I'll vote for him again. I've been defending him for the last 3 or 4 years. I think he's exactly the man for the job. And the reason I say braggart is because the media onslaught against Donald Trump has been so relentless and so overpowering that what any Republican candidate would need would be somebody who would be able to just get up in front of everybody and say, "Oh, well, just stow it. You said there was going to be 200,000 and it was 20,000, and you said that," and he is the kind of guy who is not going to let them just continue to try to make him into the villain of this. And he's going to make sure that the whole country knows about it. And I don't see any, look, I don't want to get ahead of the card here. But as we record this on April 13th, it is looking very much like the worst of at least this first wave of the pandemic has passed. And while it was a near thing in places like New York, it doesn't seem that we had oversaturated the healthcare system, which was the entire point of the social distancing in the first place. So if it turns out that that's the case, then you can call Donald Trump whatever you want to, but all of the worst case scenarios about COVID-19 simply didn't come true. And you can tell that he's doing a good job, because now in front of our eyes, the narrative is now shifting. Well, the deaths are lower, but that had nothing to do with Trump. That was all a result of the Democratic governors. Okay, pick one. I mean, if the recovery and the low numbers
the criticism was he was giving the governors too much responsibility.
Right. So this is what Donald Trump is capable of doing, and no other Republican president. In fact, I can't think of another candidate of either party who even comes close to him with his just plain straightforward, "Nah, that's baloney. This is, you said this, and you said this, and you said this and this, and here are my numbers, and they're great. You said it was going to be huge. It was not. It was less huge. It was the smallest thing. It's just going to go on and on and on. And I'm proud of him. I think he's handled it very, very well. And when it's all done, Scotty, the accusations are going to continue until the election. The night of the election, and then if Donald Trump wins, as I think he probably will, then they'll be amplified even more the next day. But the bottom line is, if Trump appears to be relatively solidly ahead now. And 3 or 4 months from now, barring some unseen complication, he will be able to do what all winners are able to do. He'll be able to point to the scoreboard. And,
now,
and
I want to say, though,
that's the argument that can't be defeated.
Because Nate Cohn in the New York Times is not making the argument that Donald Trump is relatively solidly ahead. He's saying that polls that are showing Joe Biden ahead are not as strong as they seem. And in fact, if it shows Biden up by 4 or 5 points, it's probably pretty close to even. And because Trump enjoys an advantage in the so-called tipping point states, that Biden's people should be running scared. On the other hand, Cohn is saying anything can happen between now and election day.
I appreciate it as always. As always, I appreciate your journalistic integrity in restating what the article actually said. What the article actually said is that Trump is ahead. If he's saying that Trump is ahead in the tipping point states and Biden's up by 3 or 4, but those numbers aren't very solid, then remember the lead that Hillary Clinton went into the election with. We all know that these samples are skewed, and not just skewed towards Democrats, they're skewed towards people who, as you say, are likely voters. And Donald Trump was elected by unlikely voters. And no one's talking to those people, not really. And when you have a sample base of, I don't know what it is anymore, it's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, maybe something like that. You miss one Donald Trump Republican Ladies Federated Club, and you're grossly undersampling Trump's support.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have many days to go before this election, and a lot is going to happen in the meantime. And we will be here 5 times a week analyzing that on Bill Whittle Now, our other show, Right Angle, another 5 shows a week, including one special episode for members only. And we are grateful to the members who have made all of this possible. In addition, unexpectedly, Bill has been doing a daily show. What is this, 5 times a week, Bill, that you're doing the Coronasphere Lounge?
I was doing it every day. I did it every day for 3 weeks. And then I've decided that since there wasn't too much news, now it's just Monday through Friday.
Okay. So we're doing it 5 days a week on that as well. Our numbers have been growing as far as people watching the videos, time that they spend watching the videos, members signing up because of those videos. And we are grateful especially for all those new folks who have joined the ranks of members at BillWhittle.com. If you've not yet done that, you're watching this on YouTube perhaps. Of course, you can hit that little Liberty bell on YouTube to get those alerts, and you can subscribe to the channel. But more importantly, click on through and go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link and join the team of producers who's making this possible. Again, we're also grateful to our friends at the Patriot Post who are making available to our friends a free Patriots Primer on American Liberty. When you sign up for their free email blast, you're going to have a blast at the Patriot Post, because not only do they have great conservative news and opinion, but some of the funniest memes on the internet. Don't miss that. We'll provide a link in the description below. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.